Good evening. I'm Ken Clark, advisor of GATOR Town. For those of you that would like to stay for a brief discussion, please feel free to do so. Those of you that need to leave, please feel free to do so as well. I would like to introduce two people from the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. They're here. They can answer any questions about the UF Samuel Proctor History Program. That's Randi, Gill-Sadler, and Jennifer Thelusma. Several of the actors will be joining us momentarily once they have a costume, so if you have any questions for them, you can do that as well. To start, I'd be happy to take any comments or questions from the audience tonight. Anybody there have a question or a comment?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, back there.
Hey, how did you get the idea for this?
Well, I had done an earlier work working with the libraries here, the Smathers Library and the Judaica Library, and we did some stories of Holocaust and immigrant stories. And while I was working on that project, the people from the Center for the Humanities said, you've got to listen to the oral histories over at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. There are over, at the time, 300. Now there are over 400 interviews of African Americans in this area and their experiences before integration, during integration, and after integration. From that, I worked with Randi and Ryan Marini and several others over there, and they gave me 40 of the interviews. Now, so these interviews that you saw tonight are just clips of that. Some of them last for an hour, over an hour. So we started out with over 40 hours worth of these interviews, brought them down to about 20 interviews, and then we ended up with the first 14 that you saw tonight. Somebody had a question over here?
I had a question.
Yes.
In the first act of the stories, we saw a lot of imagery with, within the stories of the walls, both metaphorical and physical. Did you have that on your mind when these walls were brought up for the second act and we saw the other performers
sitting on the walls?
Yeah,
we wanted them more as witnesses to what was going on as well. Some of the imagery that we really worked with were the railroads, okay, where people had to walk the railroads, that the railroads divided towns and areas from, and that's where we get terms like on the other side of the tracks, the right side and the wrong side of the tracks, those type of things. Being unable to walk alone if you were a black person in certain areas there with that. And other themes that came up in particular also was, when were you a gator? If you go to the visitor center over there, it has right on the wall, when were you a gator? And with these stories, you saw that not everybody who graduated immediately from the university considered themselves a gator. Any questions, comments for our experts on oral history?
Sorry.
Yeah. No.
Is there any way that we can, if we're interested in these stories and we want to learn more about the oral history, is there any way we can access that, and how do we do that?
A lot of the interviews are actually posted online so you can access the transcripts, but then you also have the ability to go into our archives in the oral history program are located in Hugh Hall, and if there are any interviews you're interested in seeing if we have that on our shared drive that haven't been uploaded yet, and you have access to that as well.
And if you're interested in getting involved in oral history, we're always looking for people to volunteer and help us either collect interviews, transcribe interviews, or things like that.
But on their website, you can go right to the GATOR tests. I think you've got them listed at the 14 people, and you can just, log on there. Yeah.
Yes. Are a lot of the people who were interviewed for this place still living in Gainesville, or are they pretty much spread across the country?
A few of them are still here. Some have branched out. I know specifically Ron Coleman lives in the Jacksonville area, but Kevin can attest to this. A few of the interviewees have come over the past week and seen the play for themselves. So a lot of them are still around. We're still in communication.
Yes, we had on Sunday matinee, we had 3 of the people. We had both Albert White and Mrs. Albert White were here, and Bernard Hicks was here opening night. Gladys Thompson was here, and it was interesting because she ran out with her daughter, and we were unable to grab her before she left. But she made an interesting comment to some people there that she didn't think that her words were important or interesting. And as you saw today, she was one of the really interesting characters that really personified what was going on at this time. So, and the other ones that were here, we have pictures of the cast with the people that the real characters with them. Do you have any questions for our cast members?
Cool.
Yeah.
Everett is my TA, so I would like to ask you a question.
Excuse me?
Everett is my TA.
Okay, great.
For this, were there any characters that you felt you wanted to tell the story most of, or was it point blank across the board? You liked one person more than another? Or?
Well, I like Sam Taylor because when you think about the time that he said these words, this was in 1970.
It was 45 years ago.
Stuff was still a little hot around here, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Things were still. Sure. So to say those words at that time was a very brave statement to make. Imagine calling everybody a nigger, right?
And he was the first African-American president of the student government here at UF as well.
So that's obviously that's the part, and I'm so grateful that you gave it to me because wow, it's inspiration.
Yes.
I was wondering how you guys feel and how you get in different state of minds in each of these scenes when you have to change character and you have to take on a completely different mindset of what did this particular person go through with their experience. How did you prepare for that?
You and I really had we had one main big character.
Yeah.
So
I guess it was easier because we had that one mindset, and then the others were kind of. I mean, they were important, but they weren't as.
they were just there to supplement
Yeah.
the other story. And so, like, when I would go on and be a racist, I wasn't like, okay, what's his backstory? It was like, I'm prepared to be a racist, and I'll say something stupid.
I was going to ask how when whoever was the bad guy, you had a lot of bad guys. When you were first, like, if you all sat down and, and read the parts or whatever, how, were you feeling, like, uncomfortable being the white bad guy with some of these African-American actors, or
It is so the opposite of me, I can't even begin to tell you. I grew up in multicultural Miami. All of my friends were mostly black. I played in a blues band in the south side of Chicago. I mean, I'm just so the opposite of all of the
must
people.
have been really hard.
Well, what it is you have to tap into something personal. And just to share an experience that happened to me, I was with my black friend Dwayne when I was just a little kid, about 10 years old. And we were in a singing group, and we got to sing at the mall. And we were accosted by some KKK members in the parking lot. And they were not wearing hoods, and they were not dressed in outfits. They were actually dressed in suits. And if you didn't look twice, you would have thought they were well-to-do businessmen. And they were intimidating 10-year-old kids. And they intimidated my friend because he was black, and they intimidated me because I was with a black friend. Which is interesting because here we are set apart as black and white facing not so much white supremacy, but just pure hate and stupidity. And you fuel your performances from your experience. And there's also a lot of paperwork because, I mean, I think I have only 13 lines, but they're coming out of the mouths of 12 different people. And so to do them differently and to make sure you're not doing caricatures, but that you're doing those people.
Gosh, that's amazing because I just thought you had so much more, but it was so powerful.
Well, and then, but there's that thread underneath. And the thread, you'll notice, I don't have a lot to say, and I'm under the surface, but I show up in every decade.
Yeah, but it was kind of nuance of the same.
Right, and I'm still here.
Yeah.
And that's something that we hope this play will help to address, and hopefully we will get to the point as a species where we can embrace each other for what we have in common and respect and enjoy our differences. That's what the country's about, and that's where we should be as people, in my humble racist point of view.
Here's another question.
Yeah.
I'm getting to be like you over there. But you only opened last Sunday, right?
Last Friday.
Last Friday, so it's like a week.
Yeah.
So I doubt people would have come that would have done this, but did anybody who was in the audience like get up and leave or not like what they were hearing?
During the middle of the show?
Yeah, just curious.
I think some kids who had to be here left at intermission because.
I don't think. Yeah, well, we have a captive audience of students, so they. But I don't think anybody left in the middle.
No.
Slamming doors or
Well,
anything.
we can't leave until someone shows us where to go because we parked in the right place. And we did a hike to get here. So.
Right. Yes, back here.
Hey, I was just wondering, this question is open to anybody. What would you say, it's always so much easier to look back in the past and be like, oh my God, that was so stupid, how do we do that? Especially, you know, looking at like a white middle-class guy, you know? And I guess what would you guys say is the biggest barrier for the African American community at University of Florida? Or what is
Today?
Today, yes. What would you say is the positive change that needs to happen that is, I guess, tangible and can be done today? If that makes sense.
Well, one of the things that is in the news right now is enrollment. Okay? If you saw the Gainesville Sun just last week, the week we opened, there are 50% less African American freshmen here today than there were in 2008. So, you know, having the opportunity to come to the flagship university in the state of Florida. The state of Florida has 16.7% African Americans, something like that, and it's less than 7% here on campus. So we don't have a population that reflects the population of the taxpayers in Florida.
Is it because students, high school students, don't apply?
I think
maybe what we were hearing, maybe is it because African American high school students now want to go back to being with people just like themselves, like in the part of the script?
Does anybody want to?
I think it's more to do with cost, because it's, I mean,
The cost.
Tuition rate rises every year, so I don't know if it's an issue of them not wanting to go. I don't know. I mean, I'm not.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Did they apply and then choose not to go, or?
Yes, Randy?
I'll just interject quickly. I think the opposite side of that same coin of low enrollment is you also have to look at the amount of African American faculty who are coming to UF, and if UF can actually retain African American faculty, and also think about the state of the African American Studies program on campus as it is now, that only a couple of years ago was able to start giving out degrees. So I think getting students here is one thing, but you have to have faculty and institutions and programs here that will retain them, because you can get as many people to come just off the name, but if you're not retaining them and they're not graduating, you can locate that in other areas that are lacking.
I think also as far as recruitment goes, I feel like there's been less of an effort since I was in high school as there is now to recruit minority students. It's not something that the university goes out of their way to do. And minority students do think, I thought, what is there at the University of Florida for me? Will I feel comfortable? What programs will I be involved in? What is there at the University of Florida where there's 50,000 undergrad students that would make this a big place feel small? So there's a lot of animosity. There are blackface incidents that have happened on campus since I've been a student here. We just got an African American Studies major last year, and that was as a result of the blackface incident. Now, that doesn't address the problem for those who are involved. It just is kind of like a, here, let's give you this, and you guys are pacified, but what about the students who are involved in this? There are fraternity houses on campus that have the Confederate flag on the wall that doesn't make African American students feel comfortable. There are houses on campus.
Like fraternities?
Well, I won't say fraternities, but I've not seen the Confederate flag on people's trucks since I came to Florida.
Mickle Pinckney, Dr. Mickle Pinckney, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I think there's a convergence of things. I've been here 20 years now, and I came here because of the lack. I was brought here as a faculty member because I had experience not only in theater but in cultural studies at a time when it took a year for me to figure out that the president and administration wanted me here because I was a cultural studies specialist. They couldn't even call the name of it. There was a lack at a time when the state had to diversify the curriculum, and nobody knew what to call it. So figuring that out, but even at that time, there were a lot of efforts being made. One of the things we talked about before, something has happened, at least during the first 10 years I was here, there was something called People Awareness Week, which became People Awareness Month. It no longer exists. So the awareness factor of informing people about difference and what it's all about, inclusiveness and what it's all about, along with, to be honest, the One Florida initiative has had a lot to do with the trickle-down effect of what's happening now. The idea of only, giving a certain percentage of students, but the admissions requirement has gotten so high here, along with the fact that people are not paying enough attention. I happen to serve as a minority coordinator for the area. I hear so many students talking about issues that are coming from other students. And to try to communicate this to even other faculty who aren't aware of what they're saying and what they're doing, the kinds of effects that they're having, and the kinds of effects that students who are coming to, non-minority students who are coming to the university with no awareness and no training in awareness anymore, are sending these students to places like FAMU, where they feel more comfortable because there is a dissatisfaction, there is a dis-ease, and there is a fact that even when they come to me, and I can't do anything about the fact that nobody will talk to other students who are not other to say, there's sensitivity issues here. So it's a convergence of a lot of things. I think we were in a much better place even 5-7 years ago. We're on a downward slope again. You have to start redoing a lot of things that were working quite fine. I was very, very proud of the program we had right in this school. We were one of the most diverse graduate training programs in the entire United States. That's not a reality anymore.
Can I just say two things?
Yeah.
One was I was very amazed and happy to hear the story about Jack Youngblood. I thought that hit home to me at least. And then the other thing, this is going to seem a little strange, but I wanted to share it. I thought of it when you were doing the part about John, the steamroller John, and how the ambulance wouldn't help him, until the other ambulance for the other hospital came or whatever. And my grandparents on my father's side were Irish immigrants, and they came here at the turn of the century, 1900. And my grandfather worked in a factory. They had 10 children, and both worked very hard. And he was injured on the job, and his arm was severed. And his boss at the factory wrapped it in rags, and he had to walk home. I don't know. This was in New York City, and they didn't call an ambulance or take him to a hospital or anything, because at the time, and this is like you said, we didn't know this stuff, but at the time, the Irish were the dirty Irish. They were not accepted by the mainstream of people. Yeah. And it struck me, that hit home to me, because like we all realized, history is kind of written by the survivors, what's that saying? Mm-hmm. That what you're doing here and sharing this history with all these young people, all these students who, were born after these riots. And I mean, there's still things going on, but knowing what happened right here is so important. And I don't know, that's just I'm going off, but do you know what I'm saying, though? That's
absolutely. The interesting thing about that story is John didn't die. He went to the hospital. They cut his foot off, and the government or the city fired him, and they put him in a wheelchair. They gave him a box of pencils, and he spent the rest of his life selling pencils. And then the Tom on the tape says he was right in the corner of University. I never saw him try to sell a pencil one time. He would talk to people and say hi, but he just kind of sat in the chair for the rest of his life. And then they said that he spent the rest of his life selling pencils on a street that he probably paved for a city that didn't care about him. So.
Well, my grandfather was fired, and his arm was cut off here, and it was during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
It seems that we are out of time. I want to thank you all for being here and sharing our work with each other.
Thank you. Good luck.